All right, Aisha, thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to ask you a few questions about culturally responsive pedagogies, but before we do that, go ahead and introduce yourself to us.
Sure. My name is Aisha Khan, and I am the GT specialist at Richard J. Lee Elementary, and I've been teaching at the school for 7 years.
Perfect. My first question is, how have you allowed for student voice to change what you teach and how you teach?
Student voice, I think, is such an important part of teaching. If learners don't have a voice, they're not invested in the learning. So, most definitely, always giving them the opportunity um, to say what they're thinking, and that could be, maybe writing it down or coming and telling me, not in a whole group setting, putting them in small groups and seeing where they're most comfortable to be able to share their thoughts and their needs in an environment that's safe. So just really setting up the stage so that learners do feel like every voice is valued in the classroom, and that nobody feels any sort of uncomfortable feelings being there. I think on my part, getting to know them personally so they know that I'm invested in their learning, and that there's a little bit at stake when you start building a relationship with somebody. They want to do everything they can to make you happy, and likewise, right, when you are invested in a relationship, you try to do what you can to make another person happy. So really, I think it's a two-way street, but really it starts at getting to know learners and making sure that that environment is safe for them to be able to share their background.
Excellent. Can you share how you work with students to link prior knowledge to the learning taking place in your classroom?
Sure. So I think a big part of it is building that background knowledge with the learners. Some forms of that could be utilizing pre-assessments to see where they are, to see where they need to go, or meeting them where they are in their learning. Really a lot of brainstorming, using graphic organizers, activating that prior knowledge so that I know as an educator where they are and where I need to take them. So those are some of the things that I utilize.
And how does teaching and learning experience in your classroom rigorously engage students of diverse backgrounds?
Sure. I think, the learning experience in my classroom, I do take into account that kids are coming from different backgrounds, and I use a lot of visuals. So if I have an ELL learner, or I have a learner where English obviously is a second language, I'll use more visuals. We'll talk about vocabulary before the teaching. So that's something that I utilize. Maybe silent gallery walks, so we're activating prior knowledge, but we don't have to necessarily always use verbal communication. It could also be visual communication that they're getting, and so activating them in that sense, not always relying on that verbal piece. And then also, I think holding all learners to high expectations. So making sure that all learners, regardless of their background, regardless of where they are in their learning, they're held to those same high expectations.
And how do you ensure that all students are engaged in your lessons?
For engagement, I think I definitely use informal and formal assessments along the way while I'm teaching to see if they're understanding the learning that's taking place. Making sure that before I start my lesson, there's a learning objective, so that I know if the learning objective and the lesson is clear, then the chances of them staying on track and being able to extract what they need to out of a lesson will be more likely to happen. So making sure that my lessons are specific, and that the objective is clear for learners, I think is an important starting point. And then checking for understanding along the way.
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about classroom practices. So what do you see as the most challenging aspect of an increasingly diverse educational environment? And what steps have you taken to plan or what steps have you taken or plan to take to meet such challenges?
Sure. I think one of the biggest challenges of teaching a diverse population is not fully understanding where each learner is coming from. So cultural norms are so different from culture to culture that you know it's you want to be well versed and be aware of all of them, but frankly if you don't teach a population that is coming that's not diverse, it's hard to have that open-mindedness and be able to you know allow or understand. But I think it's important to allow for that and to not prejudge any culture or any you know population, so that um, you allow the learners to basically fill you in. And you know that verbal and nonverbal communication is so different that it's important to educate yourself as well, especially if you have learners coming in from maybe a background that you have not taught before, and the experiences that they might be coming in with. So I think having, for me, how I plan to deal with that is to put in practices that celebrate each culture, to really get to know my learners and give them that opportunity to bring in what you know what they're experiencing at home or what they've been used to for X amount of years, what they've grown up with. I think that you know that inclusiveness helps them open up, and celebrating their celebrations and their festivities and traditions also helps in bridging that gap. So celebrating things like Black History Month or Diwali or Eid or whatever, you know, Christmas, whatever is important in the learner's life is something that should be important to you. And I think a big part of that is also inviting families. So if you are having some sort of celebration in your classroom, inviting families to also be a part of it, so that you know there's that cohesiveness and kids truly feel included.
So how do you adapt your teaching to meet the different culture and learning styles of your students?
I think adapting my teaching really goes back to knowing my students, and that, you know, at the beginning of the year, a good practice for me is to go into CUME folders and see where my learners are coming from, whether that be a different state, a different country, or, you know, they have special circumstances or special needs that I need to be aware of. I think that's the starting point. Reaching out to parents and, you know, encouraging them to tell me a little bit about their child, so that before they even walk into my classroom, I already have a little bit of background knowledge on the learner. And the questions that I ask them will be more responsive to that learner versus me not knowing anything about the learner and assuming or asking questions that they might not be comfortable answering. So, you know, I think obviously questioning along the way for learning, but I do think before that child even comes into your classroom, it's super important to know them, right? Once they're on your roster, they're yours.
They're yours. All right. So now let me ask you a little bit about, you know, being responsive. What experiences have you had that have helped you understand the impact of race, culture, and ethnicity on teaching and learning?
That's a great question. I come from a minority group myself. And so I think that's been my biggest asset in understanding this diverse community of groups, of people who are different. So, you know, I find that because I've walked the walk in some aspect, not in every aspect, I don't know everybody's situation, but I do know what it feels like to be from a diverse population, that those experiences that I bring into my teaching are culturally sensitive. I mean, I've gone through things that the average person probably doesn't go through when I'm crossing the border to go home to meet my parents, or I'm coming back from Canada to the United States. There's situations that I've been in that make me feel like, you know, my diversity is questioned. So I would definitely say I think the experiences that I have myself as a minority have kind of pushed me to take on teaching, because I want to be able to help learners who, feel like they're a little out of place, who feel like maybe they don't belong, and let them know that they do belong. And beyond that, I think the schools that have taught it have been very diverse as well. So um, uh, teaching in environments where you are teaching a diverse population of learners really helps you be open-minded and realize that even though certain learners might be following a particular faith or a particular, look like they're from a particular culture, they're not all the same. Each one has their own individual uniqueness. So I think my experiences in teaching and my own personal makeup help me understand the impact of race and culture.
Yeah. So in your experience, what are the key factors that contribute to the success of students from diverse backgrounds?
I think they want to be heard. I think students from diverse backgrounds want to feel like a part of something. They don't want to be, somebody standing on the sidelines or somebody that's not included in groups or is made fun of. They want to be heard. And so if you're that one person that listens to them, I think that is a big boost for them. Regardless of what they go through, they have a safe place with you, so they can always come back to that. So I think feeling included and accepted, and ways to do that is just, having lessons that cater to those needs, where they're community building and they are building those relationships, because without strong relationships, the learning is not going to happen, right? So first and foremost, building those relationships, I think.
I know you've talked about this a little bit, but can you discuss how you feel about students' life and culture? How will you show an interest in their activities and successes?
I think first and foremost, showing an interest is being genuine and asking them about it. And I think timing is a big thing in that, asking them at a time where you have time to sit down with them and get to know them. That might be during recess. That might be during a lunch, having a lunch bunch with them and sitting with them and showing them that, hey, I'm not going to use teaching time to sit here when I'm distracted because I have 24 other kids, but I want to sit with you one-on-one, or in a small group setting, and really showing them that the relationship means a lot. I also think like attending events that some families might ask you to come to is a very important gesture that educators should definitely take on, because learning about their culture means a lot to them. Attending an event on a Saturday or a time that is, off school time, it shows them that you care and that you're there for them, and it shows their families the same thing. So I really think showing an interest is definitely, communication is key. But beyond that, if you can attend anything that they're interested in, or anything that you're invited to, most definitely take that opportunity.
Yeah. So in your opinion, what are some of the benefits of racial and ethnic diversity in the curriculum?
I think one of the major benefits is the history behind a culture of diverse people. I think learning that history through curriculum, and knowing that curriculum is not the only lens that you can do some research as an adult, that, but for learners, I think knowing that there's a rich history behind these cultures is so important to know maybe why a certain group feels the way they do. So I think the benefits of embedding this kind of diversity into curriculum is, of the utmost importance, but also learners feeling like their culture and their background are acknowledged is another really important piece for kids to feel like they're a part of a class, making sure that you're including all of the different faiths, making sure that you're including all of the different cultures to make every child in your classroom always feel like, they're important. And it's the uniqueness, right? It's the diversity, like for me, knowing all these, different cultures and customs that I'm fortunate enough to be a part of and learn about, just makes me more open-minded about people as well. So I think, the benefit of touching on diversity in a curriculum is to create citizens or to produce citizens in a society that are open-minded, that are accepting, that are broad-minded, and know that there's a history behind every culture and ethnicity that is valued. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about teacher self-awareness. So in your experience, what are the challenges faced by students of historically underrepresented groups in schools? And what strategies have you used to address these challenges? And how successful were those strategies?
I think the challenges faced by groups that are not represented in schools historically is that they don't feel like their history is valued. They don't feel like they as a population or as a community are almost at the same level as everybody else. It's almost this feeling of inferiority, like you know, and I think that can really affect learners in the things that they say to each other, the things that they might say to you, the things that parents might come in and say. So I think that the challenges that these underrepresented populations feel are definitely valid, and they're ones that, you know, if a teacher is able to bridge the gap between families, or you sense that something is, yeah, a little bit just not the norm, to reach out to those families and have that dialogue, and ask them to come into your space and show them that you care. Because I really feel like once you give families the opportunity to speak and to say, you have a better understanding of what they're coming from, and you can respond to that child in your classroom in a much more positive way.
Okay. This is for grad school.
Oh, well, I'm still saying hi. Hi, how's it going?
I Miss Merritt. This is our special education teacher, Miss Merritt. She's fabulous.
Yes.
Hi. Can I have a piece of the purple? Sorry, I'll come back later. I was just you two, sorry.
It's okay. All right. Can you tell me about a time when you contributed to diversity and inclusion? Perhaps you were teaching students in your classroom or outside of your classroom. I would like to hear about a situation like that. What were the circumstances at the time? What specific actions or steps did you take to handle the situation? With whom did you interact? Share with the outcome of that situation.
Okay, I'm just going to repeat the question to me because there
are multiple steps.
Points.
I'll go just step by step. Tell me about a time that you were teaching diverse students.
A time when I was teaching diverse students. Okay, so I think this would be a 5th grade class that I had almost 10 years ago. And though many of those learners were from the same religion, the same faith, each learner came from a different culture. And so the cultural norms that each culture had, I was not familiar with. I was familiar with the faith, but I was not familiar with all the different cultural nuances that everyone brought. So there was a time when a learner was unhappy about some decision that had been made. And that learner called out in the classroom and called out something that was very offensive to another group of learners that were in that classroom. So it shocked me because being of the same faith, you know, I didn't think that within faith there would be a problem with cultures, and that anybody would be prejudiced against somebody else even within a certain faith. So it was my first experience, and I was a new teacher, and how I handled it was first de-escalating the situation. So asking that learner to come with me outside And then after I kind of got, you know, a little bit of ahead on what was going on, taking myself and the learner to another educator and
Mhm.
explaining the situation
Mm.
and talking it out. And through that discussion, I learned that what that learner was being introduced to at home and the rhetoric that he had been hearing at home, based on a particular group of, you know, a culture of people, was negative.
Mhm.
And it was one that he had, you know, built all these preconceived notions on, primarily because that's what he was hearing at home. He was a sixth grade student, but
Mhm.
over the span of his 12 years of life, whenever he could understand, was starting to understand that, hey, this group of people, even though they follow the same faith as me, are this, this, and this, and this. So without knowing, he ratted off these, you know, characteristics of this culture that he had no, you know, prior knowledge of. He was just repeating what he saw at home. So really dispelling that, talking to him, having him apologize to the group that he had heard in the classroom was a pivotal point for me. And having that discussion with him made me really realize that, you know, these learners are coming in with whatever knowledge they're getting, and whatever they're getting from home um, can be positive or negative. And so having that discussion and looking back, I wish maybe I had reached out to the family and maybe had a discussion with the family as well. They were aware of this situation, but next steps for the family might have been something that we could have followed up with.
Mhm.
Um, However, that was a pretty emotional situation for me because I hadn't experienced something like that within the four walls of my classroom, where kids are loud and they're yelling and shouting. So it was opened my eyes to a lot.
Yeah. So our last question is, what kinds of experiences have you had in relating with students whose backgrounds are different than your own?
Mm. Um, I think the kinds of experiences that I have had have been very positive. I think the experience, the my main, I guess, my main goal when I have learners that are different than me is to get to know them.
Mhm.
So when I am working with learners that are different from me, I will ask them various questions to learn primarily more about their background and their living situation and their culture and customs and what they like to do on the weekend and where they like to eat. And when
Mhm.
I can start bridging gaps between them and myself, there's a commonality. So I can, you know, I can talk to them about various topics that are not just academic related, but that we connect with on different, you know, just on a humane level, really. And I think once they feel that humanity, walls start breaking. When you give them choice, when you give them choice in projects, even and whatever they're working on,
Mhm.
where they can be culturally responsive as well, they can include their culture as well. Then that allows for all those gaps to be, you know, bridged. It's not okay, we're working on one assignment, whole group, and everybody's working on that. No, there's a lot of flexibility and choice
Mhm.
um, that in the assignments that I offer learners, so that they can be able to weave in and bring in their own experiences.
Mhm.
And I think that makes them feel valued as well, and gives them the opportunity to say, hey, you know, my teacher is valuing me as a person,
Mhm.
and I'm grateful for sharing a piece of myself. So
Yeah,
um, yeah,
perfect. Well, thank you, Aisha, for spending this time with me, and thank you for answering all those questions.
you're so welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you.